If you can value what you want most over what you want now, you will find success. And so to be able to do that on a daily basis, to have discipline is doing things you don't necessarily want to do. That is an amazing quality. I believe you need to go and attack something, and if you have a heart and a passion, use that energy. And so as I look at talking to an NFL player, they are terrified of failing and not capturing this dream that they have the opportunity to. But where, again, I think we're evolving, and where I have found success is welcoming failures. In your money, you should fail. In everything, you should fail. Why? Because we're going to learn. Failure is powerful. And so as you see this, kind of new entrance into a world, I want to attack it with all I can, but I have to get comfortable with knowing I'm gonna fail. And if I do, and when I do, I pivot, I redirect, and I go attack again. I've taught 400 NFL players in the last 2 months. The message is very clear and very concise. Decades, not days. If I can get you to start seeing this journey in decades, not days, we know we're going into the right direction.
Jed, thanks for coming to the show today.
Scott, when I look at audience, who and what would connect to my message, it is exactly who we're about to discuss, this conversation we're about to have. I think, looking at that high performance life, this is where my life has changed from being young. But as you just mentioned, fullback being a workhorse, that's a mindset, that is a mantra that has stayed with me for a long time, and ready to dig into some of the details of it.
Well, what's so cool is to become a professional athlete, you have to make decisions and choices that are obviously going to put you in that top 1% of the category. And that means sacrifices continuously, taking risks, personal risks, challenges, all those things. When I look at that and I see an athlete who's done that at any level, and then you talk about failing multiple times, which is just learning in my book. Like, you're just going through and learning. You were accumulating these things, and while you were building your next career, you were studying for your CFP, you were developing a next platform, all while you were going through this. I just want to start with one thing. I heard on a podcast you wrote down your goals when you were in your dreams, when you were a teenager, I guess, and then 15 years later, or 10 years later, you were living them. Walk us through just quickly writing that down and achieving that goal, just so that everybody can kind of go on that quick hero's journey with you.
I love that. And that's a great place to start because you start with the best. People ask me all the time. I talk to thousands of students, professional athletes, professionals, and they all say, well, give me one thing. Everybody wants everything in a short Instagram, 10-second clip. And I say journal. Simple. Write it down. Get your thoughts down on paper. It is spiritual if you want it to be. It is discipline if you want it to be. It is self-reflection every time. But I looked at it, and I even carry my journal with me while we're talking, so keeping my notes in order. But I looked back at my journal in 2008 as a rookie in the NFL. I had just come out of a financial workshop. I had just been humbled in how little I knew about this language of money. And I remember it changing my life for two reasons. One, it set me on my own path to become a student and eventually get the CFP and do all those kinds of things. But I wrote in my journal back in 2008, I'm looking up at it because I have a copy of it behind my desk, June 21st, 2008. I wrote that I would love to come back and teach the rookies, just like myself, this language of money. Why? Because I was a business degree. I got an accounting major. Like, I understood numbers and money, but nobody had ever said the Collins family is going to get these dollars. This is your paycheck. What do you go do with it? And so in that journal entry, I said, I want to come back and I want to teach NFL players like me how to capture this dream. Same time that Broke documentary was coming out about all the statistics of professional athletes. And today I get to work with about 15 NFL teams. I'm starting to talk to the MLS, the MLB, NHL. We're starting to work with the National Women's Soccer League. So I look 15 years later and I say, that dream has come to fruition. Why? Is because I wrote it down, and that begins to speak it into. But then I went to work, and I went, you manifest, you go create your future. But it all starts with establishing that, being comfortable, even though you're afraid to say it out loud, and then go chase it with everything you have.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love the passion. I love the excitement in actually how you're executing. What's interesting is in professional sports or really anything you do, if you want to be successful, you almost have to become one dimensional. You almost have to just set everything else aside. And this is how I created the life model that we talk about on this show all the time. It was my way of dealing with imbalance. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was always going to be imbalanced if I wanted to create something great. If I want to create a great relationship with my wife, I'm going to be imbalanced in work. I'm going to be imbalanced in other things. And for a time, as you develop that relationship, you lose a couple of friends. Everything you lean into, you're going to have some level of imbalance. But a professional athlete, what I've learned in multiple interviews, in hanging out with friends that have accomplished it, and even watching my sons as they grow towards their goals, the one-dimensional train of thought of just succeeding in that one thing kind of gives you an advantage in that sport and in that goal, but a disadvantage when your peripheral is so closed. And so there's a lot. I have two sons, and the last thing I'll say is my oldest son's very peripheral. He's going on to play Division I soccer. He's had a great career. He's going to continue hopefully doing that. And he's got a great peripheral. My youngest son is in academy. He's playing every day. He is very driven on his goal. Peripheral, a little less. Still very aware, but just so dialed in to the game. Less awareness of current events, less awareness of it's all distractions. Whereas it's singular. There's no comparison in my point except for the fact that I watch it as a father and I just see the benefits of both. Like I see the benefits of the oldest having a little more peripheral, and I see the amazing accomplishments of the younger one kind of staying so focused. But how can you expect to know about finances? How can you expect to know about these things when you're so focused on making it and living each day in a career that's very difficult to do?
And one jumps into my head a conversation with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates about how they achieved their success. They wrote down one word on a piece of paper without talking, showed it, and the word was focus. There are endless shiny toys in our world that distract us from where we are trying to go. And as an entrepreneur, most importantly, you hear those words, stay the course. You have to, above all things, take the failures, take the defeats, take the distractions, and stay to the course. I actually went and did a school visit back when I was playing with a gentleman everybody knows of named Reggie Bush, and we were talking to the students, and I'm the preliminary hype man, and then Reggie comes in and everybody starts to actually listen, and his message was around not having a plan B. Reggie said, I went all in. I was completely focused and obsessed with getting here, and that is the only way you'll be able to do it. And in the car on the way back to the facility, I looked at him, I said, I don't know if that's the message I'd be sharing with the youth of today. But it is just like you said, you have your first son, your second son. It is the pros and cons and the healthy balance. I think it is unbelievable when a young person is able to prioritize what they want most. And after walking in professional buildings and companies, you see that phrase, if you can value what you want most over what you want now, you will find success. And so to be able to do that on a daily basis, to have discipline, and that's something that I talk to my daughters about a lot, and that's something I talk a lot about, is the discipline is doing things you don't necessarily want to do. That is an amazing quality. I want to manifest some ways for my daughters to lose or be in uncomfortable and hard situations so they develop that skill. But it is so singular and so, focused that they do miss that periphery. And so where I look at it is that healthier balance of, I believe you need to go and attack something. And if you have a heart and a passion, use that energy, because if anything an athlete understands is losing that singular focus and that singular passion. However, as you look at valuing what you want most over what you want now, you also need to reverse engineer the strategy. And in that reverse engineering of your strategy, I look at it as if we were playing a game of chess versus checkers. Checkers, you're just trying to move across the board. You have that singular focus and you just get to the other side. Whereas chess, you start to build a plan, build a strategy. And when you are starting to build that strategy, you have milestones, you have check-in points. So I can be singularly focused on where I want to go and what I want to do. But in chess, in Connect 4, in really any game, if you lose focus of what your opponent is doing or what is happening around you, you're ultimately going to step in a can of worms that you didn't want to. So I love the idea of having that singular focus. I believe I am somebody who inherently goes after something with all my heart and obsession, but I do have those life checks. I do have those moments where I pull up and I say, yeah, maybe I should check in on my finance. Maybe I should check in on my family or my faith. Looking at how I can build a strategy, it's all about those milestones of, for the next 3 weeks, as we're talking right now, my company, Money Vehicle, we're onboarding schools. It is coming up on August. It is go time. For the next month, I don't have to worry about anything else. I have a singular focus. We're going to onboard as many schools as possible to get them ready for the fall. After that month, now I have a check-in. Well, how are our systems? How is our team? How are things going? Did we hit the goals? But for the next month, none of that matters because we have that singular focus. So it is that healthy balance. The fact your son can do that and say, I'm ready to go and commit, I think is amazing. But it is also, how are you going to evolve and develop, and how, as you and I, as fathers, are changing what we see as success than our fathers and the generations before us. We're no longer that singular, I got a good job and I got a paycheck that's providing for my family. There's so much more to it now.
Yeah, and just having the conversations. I mean, just knowing that we're blessed enough to have a good family unit where we have conversations about peripheral. We identify when you get too singular on one thing. I am often quick to say, I love it. I'm excited for you. That's what I want you to do. But remember, there's sometimes other plans. Injuries happen. Life happens. Coaches happen. The style changes, whatever. Everything can change. And so we have to be thinking about things bigger. And we often have those conversations which I think can be valuable. A lot of families, especially in the NFL, the guys that you're teaching and training, do not come from families that have had those conversations or that have been having them. In fact, all of their family's success is rested upon their success.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot of pressure. And so I imagine a lot of what you teach is mindset and just helping them deal with those things. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You had something to say too. I love it.
And I think that is grabbing a point you said earlier in the idea of not being afraid to fail, and that you see your failures as just a first attempt. I love the acronym FAIL, first attempt in learning. That's fail to me. And so as I look at talking to an NFL player, they are terrified of failing and not capturing this dream that they have the opportunity to. But where, again, I think we're evolving, and where I have found success is welcoming failures. In your money, you should fail. In everything, you should fail. Why? Because we're going to learn. Failure is not being defeated. Failure is not an end of a game. Fail is just, I found a way that doesn't work. Thomas Edison, I found 9,000 ways that don't work until I found the one that does. And so as we look at, again, that singular focus, often why an athlete gets so distraught and derailed is because they have not dealt with failure. They've been singularly focused and progressed down one road. They've never had to pivot before. And pivot is that fancy way to say fail. People say pivot when they don't want to say I failed. So as I look at kind of those skills and those behaviors that I want myself, my kids, and people to really see of today, you're going to fail. Welcome failure. Embrace it, because failure is the greatest teacher. And I love to look at it and say, if failure leads to education, and education is power, therefore failure is powerful. And so as you see this, kind of new entrance into a world, I want to attack it with all I can, but I have to get comfortable with knowing I'm going to fail. And if I do, and when I do, I pivot, I redirect, and I go attack again. But it's that second wave, that second encouragement to stand up and go, I'm going to attack this thing, knowing I might lose, knowing I might get, failed again, but I'm going to attack it with the same energy. I look at a kickoff team in football, and, I love sports references. I also love getting away from sports altogether, but I'm reading the book by Steve Gleason, A Life Impossible, and this dude was a special teams maniac. And it was the ability. Everybody can run down on kickoff really fast one time. Can you run down, get your head knocked off, get back up and do it the second time? You got to accept failing, and you got to see, all right, now what do I learn from it? Pivot, adjust, and go attack with the same heart.
Yeah, we talked briefly in the beginning of the show. I showed the Cowboys helmet that's behind me, and I know you said you retired a Cowboy. It was a short stint, but as a joke, you said, I was there for a short amount of time, but it was your last team. Speaking of Cowboys, I went to a big conference and had the pleasure of both hearing Emmitt Smith speak and meeting him afterwards. And what was most interesting is the entire dialogue of his presentation started and ended with him having a initial fear of failure and kind of working through that, building a confidence that he was going to be the best at whatever he did. And retiring out of the NFL, the first thing he did was essentially get hooked up with Roger Staubach, who I believe had the real estate company, and started teaching him all about real estate. And he said, I was starting all over again. I was a rookie all over again. And then when Roger retired, Emmitt went out and started his own operation, and today runs his own operation. He was so excited about sharing it, and there were all these chapters. The point behind that is and I'll pause after this, but as one of the greatest lessons I've learned as I've gotten older is I love to build something while I'm in the best moment of the current practice. So when I'm building something and I've gotten to a point where I feel like there's any level of success, I like to look past it and say, what is it that I want next? So you were doing this. You were doing this while you were studying for your CFP, while you were gathering all the data and the information necessary to go to the next level. You were doing, a lot of times we do these things, we don't know we're doing them. Even the greatest running back, arguably of all time, statistically speaking, he is the greatest running back of all time. And I'm
sure some Detroit fans are just
Barry
right
Sanders. Yeah, it was great. I mean, but you know what? Wear and tear is one of the things that you got to stay healthy, and that alone is amazing, right? But he was focused on being a rookie all over again. He was focused on growing and learning, and he was building something and then building his own business while he was at the same time kind of learning from the other. And so I just think it's such a great thing that you're teaching, because you're having them not just have to think about, what if I fail? What if I succeed? And then I want to do something else too. What do I want to do later? What is the average NFL career? 3.5 years?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, you're 24 years old. You're going to have a career after that, right? What are we going to do?
And so I look at that, and you're talking, and I love that. And I've always kind of prided myself in trying to identify beyond what people see me as, because I grew up the jock, the athlete, the football guy. And I always wanted people to know there was another side to me. And so as one of my preparations, financial was absolutely a big one, but it was also the principles of life, the rules to success. I called them rookie to veteran. And as we looked at that, I got introduced to a mantra called Be a Pro. What I came to find out was Be a Pro stood for confidence, trust, and value. You needed to believe you deserved to be there. That team needed to trust that you deserved to be there. And whatever or whoever you were working with needed to feel the value. That is what a professional does. But as you mentioned, Emmitt started, the greatest in the world, started with himself having to convince, I can do this. I can be great. It is such an amazing first step, and one that so many overlook. People look at you, they look at me, and they say, oh, they're a confident person, or they have high energy. That's just natural to them. BS, man. I wake up every day and have to convince myself I'm going to do this. I am who I want to be. And I encourage myself with mindset, because dripping into that subconscious is absolutely everything. But what I love about, again, going to talk, I've taught 400 NFL players in the last 2 months. The message is very clear and very concise. Decades, not days. If I can get you to start seeing this journey of football, the opportunity the NFL provides in decades, not days, we know we're going into the right direction. And so I look at that preparation, that planning. I love when you're saying, I use the platform that I am succeeding on today to launch me into the next platform. You and I are very kindred spirits in that way. And I look at kind of what Rookie to Veteran was able to implant into Money Vehicle, what Money Vehicle is launching me into now. I look at that trajectory and I keep saying, as long as I can maintain my focus and effort on one subject, but then at the same time have those check-ins and see where I'm headed next, what has changed, where I need to pivot, and as long as those failures and defeats don't take me down, a saying I continue to tell myself every morning as an entrepreneur, I'm a tough man to kill. And if you are an entrepreneur, you know you're going to get 99 no's before you get one yes. That is a mindset that you must have. But it's preparing me for the day, and it's preparing me for my success.
Well, I'm sure being a lead blocker didn't hurt along the way, right? I mean, that kind of sets you up for being ready to take a hit and get back up over and over and over again. And the mental state that you have to be in to see the lane, to establish what one person's going to do. You're building towards that next level at all times. I think it's such a great career to have learned from. And
I will say one thing on being a fullback. The whole world changed for me the day I started to walk onto the field and stop saying, man, these are some big bad man pajamas, and started asking myself, I wonder which one of them is afraid of me. And as you establish yourself as a fullback, you got to walk onto the field and know I'm going to dish out more than I take. I know I'm going to take some. I'm going to take some hits and some pain. But at the end of the day, they're going to take a little bit more. And when that mindset for me shifted, because I wasn't a fullback in high school or college, I learned it in the NFL. Once I started to learn that position, it was behind that idea. They're going to feel it more than I do tomorrow.
Yeah, you were a linebacker, a tight end. You did a little bit of everything, right? The master of the whole game with that flexibility and fluidity of being able to go wherever you needed. And you had a coach that essentially told you, dude, if you're going to make it, you better learn one role and you better learn it great and be the best one out there. And you did it. And you survived for 7 years and learned a ton. Are you finding that the NFL guys in the training, just in general, I love that you're expanding to other professional sports too. I feel like the NFL is like the sexy, really, Taylor Swift makes it even crazier now with Kelsey, and it's grown at such a level. But I'm a soccer fan. I watch the growth of that sport, and I see so many of those athletes have zero guidance, zero help, and there's a lot of need. Are you finding that they're more receptive today as you go, or is there any change in the last couple of years you've been developing this in the openness to receive this information versus maybe at a time where people were super closed, or did it take a little while to kind of break through?
So it has drastically changed in the last decade. I mean, even from when I was playing, we were never encouraged to do things off the field. We were never encouraged to identify ourselves as something other than a football player. It has been a blessing and a curse, a lot of pros and cons to the NIL world coming into college sports. I'm sure you are seeing it is now in high schools. We are having the same conversations I had with athletic departments 4 years ago. I'm now talking to private schools, high schools, in that same manner. What that has done, again, for all the good, for all the bad, is it has forced younger athletes to identify themselves as a business. You are an athlete, but you are also a business. And so with that knowledge, it comes no longer a forced conversation, but a thirst for the conversation. If I am going to be a business, how do I conduct myself? What am I supposed to do? The questions rookies, second, third, fourth-year players in the NFL are asking me today are a decade ahead of what the conversations were when I was playing. So, yes, I have seen a massive shift in this idea of the new modern-day athlete. I think it was kind of broken by the Golden State Warriors when they got in touch with Silicon Valley and started to realize I can make $100, $200 million off the court. I can make $1 billion, on the court. I can make $1 billion off of the court. And so they started to evolve and adapt this mindset of, yes, we are athletes, but we are the new generation of wealth. Hundreds of millions of dollars, now becoming billions, I challenge every NFL team that I talk to and say, in 20 years, is this a billion-dollar room? Are you able to take what you're taking now in 20 years as a unit, turn it into $1 billion? And I believe they will be able to, because they're starting to speak this language. For so long, we have confused and really challenged the financial language to make it so taboo and so foreign so people can charge higher and higher fees. That is being done away with. Companies like Money Vehicle are out to say the masses should take these actions and these steps. Once you get into wealth and get into specifics, you need advice, you need guidance. But the fundamental principles of how to begin, how to start, everybody's journey starts with the same actions. And so, yes, the vast difference in conversation is coming from this idea that knowledge is being shared. There is no more fear of money, fear of this conversation and topic. And people really aren't concerned with failing as much. And when I say failing, I'm not talking about investing in something they shouldn't. I'm talking about asking, well, I don't really know what an insurance deductible is. That is a fail for them. That is their ego that 5 years ago they would have never asked. But today they're starting to step out and say, you know, embarrassed or not, this is a language I need to speak and I need to know it tomorrow. So I'm not worried about asking the question today.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I learned growing up is I grew up in a really blue collar family, and you didn't talk about money. Like if you asked, I asked all kinds of questions. Being an entrepreneur at heart my whole life, I was always curious. Mom, how much do you make? Dad, how much do you make? Who makes more? Like, how does that work? How much do you get to keep? I was always interested because I also saw parts of life where I felt like we could do better, or there might be some things that I just wanted to make things better in some way, and I wanted to solve the equation. I've advised for so many years for families to do the opposite, which is get open about money, reduce the barriers around money, create a conversation that's comfortable. You know, we went through a major investment banking deal and an acquisition and all kinds of stuff. I talked to my sons in detail about all the biggest challenges, about what was so hard. I had my son come out to me while I was in an ice bath, and we had just had a conversation inside, and he came out, my 18-year-old, who was 17 at the time. He goes, Dad, how could it have been the best year of your life, but also the hardest? I don't understand that. Like, I'm lost at why. And he caught me at a moment where I couldn't not be like deep, because I'm in deep cold water, about 40 degrees at the time. And I said, anything worth having and worth working that hard for is going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful. And at the end of it, you have to even question how much and how much it was worth it. Was it worth it? Was it not? Do I do it again? Is there something valuable I learned? And then the last thing I told him, I said, as I was going through this major business change and opportunity, I actually told somebody along the way, one of my extremely close friends who was by my side through the entire thing, I said, if we made nothing through this, I mean zero, but we learned everything we just learned, I hate to tell you, but what we just learned and that secret is worth 10x what we just got paid. Having gone through it, learned it, and then exceeded and excelled at it, been successful through it, regardless of the end result. It's the mental wisdom you take away from that changes everything. And so I didn't get that deep while I was in the ice bath. I had to give quick answers. I was out in about 4 minutes. But the point I'm getting at is that the sheer fact that he's asking me those questions was something I worked really hard at. And part of what I was trying to do was break down the barriers. I thought I could be a teacher or a cop growing up. Like, that was my entire mentality. And as it started to shift and I started to see other options, I learned that part of it was just breaking down those barriers in not only my brain, but everyone around me.
I mean, connecting into the enemy of good, the enemy of great is just being good. And people really downplay what that last inch, that last mile, that last whatever you want to call it, what it's going to take. As you said, anything worth getting is going to be hard. If it wasn't, everybody would go and get it. And that is something I press upon my daughters. I was an athlete, my wife was an athlete. They're naturally talented. But the difference between talent and skill is work. You have zero talent, you can go be the most skilled player on any field in the world. And so I really love that call out of the suck, of the hard. I stand in front of groups of people and somebody raises their hand and says, I want to be an entrepreneur. I say, stand up. Scott, what's your idea? Okay, great. I don't think you should do that. And you pause and you freeze and you say, if some guy is going to distract you from this dream, you didn't want it bad enough, because there's going to be 100 days you wake up and go, what the heck am I doing and why am I doing it? There is a high likelihood that I'd get $0 and a lot of knowledge. That is something you have to be comfortable with. But the idea that we want the short fix, we want the quick answer. The reason I have success is because I do things for a decade in the dark that people come and ask me about in the light 10 years later. You asked me about my journal, 15 years, this company and this curriculum I have built now, fastest growing in the United States. Superintendents are asking me, how did you do this so fast? I said, I started building this thing in 2014. That is not that fast. You have to be willing to go into the darkness and work without reward. That is the price of greatness. And if you really want to be elite, and something that I have found amongst the best in the world is this phrase of enjoying the hunt. Yes, you want to kill. Yes, you want to put it up on the wall. But you realize the greats are in there every morning and loving the pain, because the pain is what they know separates themselves. That talented individual that has been given everything is never going to be able to succeed the way I am, because they've never failed. They've never had to work through it. I was listening to the NVIDIA founder talking to a room full of Stanford grads and just going, I feel bad for you, because you've never experienced the suck. You've never gone through that hardship. Anything great, anything worthwhile in any profession is going to be hard. I also just celebrated my 15-year wedding anniversary. People go, oh man, blah, blah, you guys, it's like, no, just as hard. 15 years, like, it's nothing good is easy. And so I love the call out, because that is something I really want to press upon my kids, myself, and really everybody. We all want gumdrops and roses every day, and that's just not the reality of life. You got to go work for something and truly, eventually, take it from somebody else if it is something worthwhile.
Yeah, it's huge. It's funny because I one of the biggest changes I made in my life was I had always been results oriented, so much so that I really never focused on loving the hunt. You know, as you said, it was, and I look at the differences between some of the most successful people that I know in professional sports, that personally that I know in watching successful children become successful adults. They love to practice. They love to practice. They don't just love the game. They actually love practicing. And when you think about that and you look at the enjoyment of the hunt, the daily fight, it's something special. As I got older and I shifted my mindset, there was one other thing that I think I've held on to and I talk about all the time, and that is something that I know you're doing along the way. And instead of being focused on the transaction, you've got to be focused on the relationship. And everywhere you go, just like the process, I think the other level of that, there's another level of just not just loving the practice, but actually loving each thing each coach along the practice is teaching us, loving each person, each competitor that we get to go against. You know, there's things I can learn from each of them, and picking those things up and then planting them for long-term relationships, building a mindset of abundance, true abundance, versus that scarcity that you kind of start with. Because if you only care about the results, all you're going to do is keep kicking further field goals, because they're never going to ever get there. You're never going to get to the one that you actually want. I need more. I need more. I need more. And it's empty.
It is. The Psychology of Money, great book that calls out that need in money. At the end of the book, they said, you know, I have something that billionaire will never have, enough. And that is why you set goals. That's why you set landmarks, and you appreciate and celebrate them along the way. But you mentioned something right there that, my daughters are now at these camps, and every time they get home, one of my questions, I always love to ask them kind of open-ended questions, but one of my questions is, well, who is the best one on the field? Like, who is the best player out there? And they would say, oh, this girl was really good, blah, blah, blah. And I said, all right, tomorrow you go against every drill against that person. Not because I think you're going to beat them. I think you and hope you're going to lose to them, but you're going to steal from them and you're going to get better every step of the way. And so looking at that, it is such a big kind of concept to welcome that knowledge and welcome that notion. But truly having those milestones in place where you say, this is enough for me, this is what I went and set out for and accomplished, I got to celebrate those things, because if I don't, you just pass by. Success kind of comes and goes. And so I love that continual knowledge of, I'm here to improve. I'm here, if I can get better 1 inch at a time. But as you were talking about the relationship, one of the greatest skills I love to develop is this idea of mentorship and networking. And people say all the time, like, I talk to new people every day. That's the beauty and curse of the virtual world, is I talk to somebody in every place in the country and the world. And they say, well, how do you continue a conversation? And it is so simple. Why, how, what? Simon Sinek's start with the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? How did you get to be and do what you are doing? And then what can I do to become more like you? Those 3 questions will bring out any information you want. And believe me, nobody likes talking about themselves more. Everybody wants to be asked questions about their career, their journey, how they did what they do. Why, how, and what? You can have somebody talking for 45 minutes. So get out, build your networks, because those bridges that you build today, you'll never know when you get to go walk by them. I just had a deal come through last week that has been 5 years in the making. A bridge, I planted a seed and just poured on it, let it go. And as that relationship, it finally came to fruition. But you got to get out and network. You got to get out, meet people, and learn from everyone you meet. Plus, minus, or equal. Stop thinking a mentor can just be somebody 25 years older than you. I know 22-year-olds today who are teaching me amazing things.
Every time I ever mentored a new person in the business, I gained more out of that relationship at the time than they were gaining, because I'm teaching them the basics. They're reminding me of my foundation. It's such a powerful thing. Sometimes just teaching it allows us to remember what we were doing in the beginning days that was actually working, that we stopped doing along the way because we got comfortable. And comfort is dangerous. How old are your daughters?
10 and 8. So I'm just getting started.
Well, I also want to make the point that setting standards and having some level of accountability and coaching is good to start when they're young. And I believe a lot of people, it's funny with my boys, I get asked a lot, like, what did you do? First of all, they're great kids. Their mom's a great mom, and we do the best that we can. And there's no secrets. There's no special things. We're just a family doing the best that we can, the greatest job we know how. But some of the things that people often want, to your point earlier, is they want the result of the gentleman that they become at 18 years old or whatever it is, but they don't want the accountability you held them to when they were 5.
Bingo.
Or when they were 7, or when they were 10, or the conversations we had about winning and losing. When one of my sons was probably 7 or 8 years old, he had a coach that gave the game ball to like the worst kids on the team every single game. And it drove him crazy because he was working so hard that he actually got in the car and started crying. And he said, how come I work so hard and I never get a game ball? And I'm scoring all the goals and I'm doing all the work. And it wasn't about being selfish or narcissistic, or it was about just the coach was rewarding the wrong behaviors. And the reality was that's how that's good for the kids that are never going to, that are exceed or excel at this sport. But for the one that wanted to excel or exceed, it was quite challenging. And so I had a conversation with him that was very, I said, hey, are you playing for that coach? Or are you playing for yourself? Who are you playing for? You're not playing for me. You're playing for yourself. So if you feel like you had a great game, you did. And that's a lesson that most people don't have nowadays with a 7-year-old. And so I commend you for giving your daughters great advice on how to be competitors in life because they'll be competing at so many things that they're doing. Jed, I want to take a minute, and I just want to understand. Talk to me about the curriculum. Like, tell me what you're doing. I know that you've obviously got something really cool that's happening. The money vehicle is something that you're not only teaching. It's now, you said you're taking it into schools. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. So we are in 25 states, hundreds of schools, school districts. So in the past 3 or 4 years, really since the COVID pandemic, we've seen states start to mandate something everybody has thought was common sense for 40 years. You should go through a financial literacy class to graduate high school. Again, in 2015, I was leaving the NFL. That was the road. I thought that, and I said, where is that class? Why wasn't I taught? Why, I would have gone to that class. I would have learned. There wasn't that class. And so I looked into education. I looked into schools, and, you back into how you're able to actually scale a curriculum, not being a Main Street publisher. Today, Money Vehicle is the fastest growing curriculum, and I would argue, biased opinion, the best high school financial literacy curriculum in the country, because it was created for and intended for high school students. And as we look at the analogy, so what we really do is focus on translating the language of money. Money Vehicle in and of itself is an attempt to get students to see money not as the destination, not as the noun, but money as a verb. It's a vehicle. It takes you somewhere. And so as you go through our 12 chapters, every chapter connects to a different piece of an actual vehicle. High school students understand a car. So how can we look at investing with a new lens? Well, let's call it the engine. How do you look at, your foundational accounts? That's your garage. How do you look at insurance? That's your seatbelt. How do we connect these things to something you already understand and then apply it to your life? So where we really differentiate is not just in the storytelling, but in preparing teachers and educators. This class, this subject, you weren't taught money. I wasn't taught money. There's not many schools teaching teachers how to teach money. That's really where we had to focus the last 4 years, is how do we train the trainers? And in doing so, the curriculum has started to go beyond the classroom. Education fails without action, especially when it comes to financial literacy. The proponents of people saying financial literacy is worthless is because you haven't focused on the behaviors and those actions. As you work through our curriculum, you actually create a financial plan. And if you want to make something interesting to a 17, 18, 19-year-old, make it about them. So we have them create the character, them create the actions based on what they're learning through this program. But it has been such a neat kind of come to fruition dream, going against achieving something that many have told me for a decade is impossible. We are now about to announce a partnership with the New Orleans Saints to go statewide throughout Louisiana. We are, again, having extreme success because of the focus on the teachers, but the ability to translate it beyond the classroom for the student to their real lives. It is such a crazy, crazy time. But again, why you chase down your goals, why you write them down, and why you do things in darkness is because I believe in the next year or two, Money Vehicle is going to be a nationwide story, and one that is going to impact what my goal in 2015 was. How do I impact 1 million students? I can stand in front of hundreds, thousands, but if I wanted 1 million students to learn this language, I had to go build something, and that's what our team has done.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's something that definitely, I remember asking my mom and dad for Christmas at like 17 for a book on investing because I wanted to learn what it was and how to figure it out. And it took me so long to get through it because I had no concept. And back then there was no watching a 5-minute video on YouTube or some draw shop thing that you could here's what it is when you invest in a stock. Like, it was like reading a really boring book that your brain wasn't ready to establish yet, and over and over again. And I remember when I became a financial advisor, I was working in politics, and I called one of my aunts, and she said, "You're gonna be great at this job. I think you should apply." And I did. And I thought to myself, well, at the very least, I'm gonna learn how to manage my own money. So if I could learn how to manage my own money, even if I fail, then it will be something that will help me. And it really triggered all these stepping stones that led to the further parts of the career. And And it really just starts with understanding that it's not a vehicle that's not meant for you. I think so many kids grow up, especially high schoolers, and they assume that whatever the position in life their families are in, whatever the community they live in, whatever it is, they're so held to that concept. And breaking free from that and seeing money as a vehicle, which is what you're doing, is providing them a freedom. It's empowering them to be the best version of themselves, to expand beyond the basics of what they think they can accomplish.
And Scott, we open each of our classes, a semester-long, 100-hour class, with a simple question. Go around, you got 20 students, you got 30 students. Ask each of them to write down the finish to this sentence. Money is. You will see 20 different responses to that question. And it is the first time students start to look at each other and go, this is going to get interesting. Why? Because we come from very different backgrounds, very different relationships. Like you said, at 17, you were asking your parents. I don't know how equipped they were to answer those questions. Mine certainly weren't. But today you do have different introductions, different models, different relationships with this thing. But it is, people say, well, where are we going to fit it in the curriculum? My response is always, there's one thing every high school graduate has in common. They're all going to get a paycheck. So let's start preparing them for it.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about, just personally, 15 years married, you said, and you said it's taken time. I'm at 21, and interesting thing I did, I used to do all these town halls, and I would have 50 people in the room, and to prove a point about markets going up and down, I would ask the room to stand if they've been married 10 years, because couples would be in there, and I'd say, all right, stay standing if you're married 20 and 30, 40, and sometimes we get to 65 years.
Wow.
And I would ask the ones that were married over 50 years, how many were there bad days? And they would say yes. And I said, were there bad months? Yes. And then someone inevitably every time would say, Scott, there were bad years. There were bad consecutive years. And we made it through. And looking back at 60 years, their kids look at them as a pinnacle of success, as a pillar, as a foundation of love. And it's because of the work they put in. It goes right back to what you were saying originally. So I didn't want to gloss over the 15 years of positive marriage that I heard you say and I forgot about. I wanted to table and come back. What's next for you? So we know the program is launching. We know what you're accomplishing professionally. What are some of the things you see yourself accomplishing in your life? Are there things that you've laid out that you're excited about? What's written on that journal?
I'm always like you. I'm always planning 2 or 3 steps ahead. I would say the biggest one for me right now is finishing my next book, which is going to be the Rookie to Veteran book. The principles I've taken away from the game of football, but really sport. And that's what, I hope every parent, everybody understands. Sports is amazing. I love sports. It is just an entrance to what life is supposed to be, though. It is supposed to be this thing and game we played is going to teach me something that at 32, 42, and 52 is still going to be with me. That's the real intention of sport. So finishing that. And I have, again, my journals from my journey. So I always hoped to go back and kind of tell the Jed story of fly on the wall, got cut 13 times. But this fall is 2 of my dreams coming to fruition. I'll spend, again, 14, 15 Mondays in NFL buildings this fall, and we will have thousands of students in Money Vehicle in high schools every day. So it's really kind of finding how I get to enjoy this moment of success after 5 years of sitting in this room by myself thinking I'm crazy on some days to improvement. Great. Now we're here. Now it's happening. How do I get better? And so that is an endless journey for me. Yeah,
I think it's so important. So many times I think we diminish sport, and I think athletes often diminish it in themselves. You wanted to be known as something other than an athlete, a jock. We all feel that in some capacity, but looking at my 2 sons, all of our friends, watching their trajectory and what sports has done for them, I tend to look at sports just like math. if your daughters were killing it at math, we'd give them every outlet that we could, and we'd provide them the ability to just mathematically excel. And then when math ran its course, they would leverage their knowledge of math to apply it to the rest of the world. But we've always looked at sports as this diminished, like, it's not as good as math. It's not as good as English and reading, but I don't care. I disagree. I think it's actually being a great teammate, being someone who knows how to work towards a goal, experiencing pain, working, enjoying the practice, the hunt. These are things that you're losing continuously, being told you're not good enough. You know, this is life. And it's why every company in America and across the globe today will hire a Division I athlete over a straight A Ivy League student almost every time, unless it's a specific role. But if they come up together, they're getting hired. So keep preaching and building athletes into great humans and giving them the intellect that they need to realize that they are more than that, but what they've been doing is just as valuable as what anyone else has been doing. And although it is entertainment at some point in time, once you get to the pro level, it's still very valuable. Any final comments before I ask how people can find you?
Just the last thing I tell athletes is they get so confused in, hey, I retired at 18, 22, or 26. I'm starting over, kind of like you're referencing Emmitt Smith. I'm a rookie again. You are a rookie again. Begin with that beginner's mindset. But like you were just referencing, understand the tool belt that you now have to go and enjoy this next chapter. I would love to connect, reach out. LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect with me. So Jed Collins on LinkedIn. Check us out at yourmoneyvehicle.com. If you have a high school or a district that needs a financial literacy curriculum, believe me, it is going to be worth their time. But truly, follow us on social. The Money Vehicle movement is growing by the day. Scott, I appreciate the opportunity to share the message and truly just connect with you. I know this is going to be just the beginning of a friendship and a mentorship. So appreciate it. And until the next time, everybody go steal an inch today.
All right, Jed, thanks so much, man. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.